Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie, and today I'm so excited to show you the newest collection from Cracked called Walk That Walk, along with a new bonus shade and their jelly of the month. I also want to give a big thank you to Cracked Polish for sponsoring today's video. So that means I am being paid to review these polishes, but everything that I say in my review, all of the thoughts and opinions are honest and my own. And I definitely have a lot of thoughts on these, so I will save them for after the comparisons. For now, let's just get into the swatches. The first polish we have is Peep Toe, which is a warm strawberry red cream. This one was absolutely flawless. I got this opaque for me in one coat. I was beyond impressed with the pigmentation, how smooth the formula was, where it wasn't too thick or anything. It just felt so perfect. Granted, I do always have like a heavier hand, so if you do thinner coats, you might need a second one. But again, I just did one coat for my full hand swatch and think it looks so stunning. Next we have Footworthy, which is a bright warm orange with purple Aurora pigments. So even though this is described as orange, I feel like it kind of teeters on being a coral shade, or maybe almost like a papaya shade of orange, where it just has this like warm undertone. And even though I mentioned it in a recent video that I do not like papaya, I love it as a color. I think it is so beautiful. So naturally, I really loved this one. It again had a beautiful pigmented formula that was just so buttery smooth to apply. I would say this one is just a little bit more crelly leaning, especially compared to the last shade being a super creamy opaque cream. So I got this fully opaque for me in just two coats, and I would say that the shimmer in this is pretty. It is on the subtle side, so it's not super glowy like other shimmers that we see, but I do think it stands out beautifully against the base color. It's definitely a lot prettier in real life, though you do lose a lot of it in lower lighting. Next up, we actually have the bonus shade, which is called Instant Mood Booster, and this is a Sunshine Yellow Cream. As you can see, this one had a pigmented formula, though to be honest, I did grab a little too much polish on the brush, so I had to like wipe some of it back off. But I don't think my first coat was super thick by any means, so hopefully you can still get an idea of just how pigmented and creamy this shade was. It was just so stunning. Like, I love bright sunshine yellows, and I had to squeeze it in for like the rainbow. But I will say I noticed that this one was a little bit thicker compared to Peep Toe, for example, so I could see this one needing thinner at some point, which I don't see as a bad thing. I just personally prefer much more opaque creams. So back to the collection, the next shade we have is Barefoot Beauty, which is a fluorescent yellow with green and gold shimmers. So this is definitely more of the crelly shimmer kind of formula, and as you can see, I am kind of struggling with the application here. I personally don't think I just grabbed enough polish, so it was a little bit patchy on the first coat. As I'm sure you can tell, I have a couple of bald spots, so I did try to go in with a slightly thicker second coat to sort of even everything out, and I definitely think it did for the most part. It still is a little bit sheer because it's such a light shade and more of that crelly formula, so you can still make out some nail lines. So if you want to make it fully opaque, I would probably recommend a third coat for this, which I did here, and you can barely see any visible nail line. I feel like it also intensifies the color a little bit more, but for my full hand swatch, I just did the two coats. And again, apologies that I don't have like direct sunlight. It's just overcast, bright, indirect kind of lighting, but you still get a sense of how bright this is, where it's not a neon shade, but I think I would call it like a bleached neon, which I thought was really pretty. The only downside is that I think the green shimmer was really hard to see against this color. The green of the collection is called Ready to Stumble, and this one is described as a neon green with blue Aurora pigments. Now, I know what you're thinking, and we are going to see some comparisons later, I promise. But as far as this shade goes, it is absolutely gorgeous. Again, it had a really smooth, even kind of formula. I would say maybe most similar to Footworthy, which was the orangey coral kind of shade, where it's a little bit on the crelly side. You know, you see some visible visible nail line, but it's still very pigmented at the same time. So I personally found this opaque enough for me in 2 coats. I'm not sure if you can tell, but my second coat was definitely on the thicker side. So if you do thinner or just regular kind of coats, you might need a third for this shade, depending on how much visible nail line you want to see. I thought this one was so stunning, definitely one of my favorites from the lineup. It's just such a beautiful shade of green, and I love how glowy the blue shimmer shines against it. It's still a little bit on the subtle side, but definitely stands out more than some of the other shimmers, I think. Then we have Fresh Pedicure, which is described as a bright blue cream. This one again had a super smooth formula that was very easy to paint with, but as I'm sure you can see, it is a little bit more on the crelly side, so it wasn't as creamy and opaque as Peep Toe or the bonus shade Instant Mood Booster. But even with that, I feel like the formula was still really easy to work with. It still was pretty great coverage on the first coat, and I found it opaque in 2 coats. I also think the shade of blue is just so stunning, so perfect for summer. It's a shame that I didn't have direct sunlight when I was doing my full hand swatches, because I feel like it would just look so much prettier, but hopefully you can tell just how bright and beautiful this shade is, even without direct sun. And rounding out the collection, we have Sandals Required, which is a neon hot pink with purple shimmers. And as I'm sure you know, this was another favorite of mine. It was just such a dream. Again, having a super pigmented formula, very even coverage, where it just looked almost flawless on that first coat. I think it's just a little bit sheer, but it was fully opaque for me in just 2 coats. And even though the shimmer in this again is a little bit on the subtle side, I feel like you can still tell that it's there. It just has like a nice like subtle effect, especially more apparent in real life than what you can see on camera. Like the glow of the shimmer just kind of gets lost in the glare on my nails, but I think in direct sunlight, which I'll be able to show in the next clip, you can see it a little bit more, and it just has a really beautiful effect. But even still, I'm just a sucker for the hot pink base color. So here is the Walk That Walk collection, worn as a skittle in 2 coats each, except for the red on my pinky that's still 1 coat, plus top coat in direct sunlight. I think the coverage on these is so gorgeous, and obviously the shimmer is going to shine a little bit more in direct sun. The yellow is the only one that's a little bit sheer, but also the weakest again when it comes to the shimmer contrast. And on my other hand, I have 2 coats of Sandals Required with top coat, and I just absolutely love how this looks. It's so bright, so neon, and I love that subtle sparkle from the shimmer. And lastly, the jelly of the month for June is called I Love You So Matcha, which is a matcha green jelly. I am a matcha girly. I have it almost every single morning, part of my morning routine and breakfast. So naturally, I was very excited about this one, even though you would think the shade of green is like not my favorite. It being branded as matcha makes me look at it in a different way. That being said, the formula on this one was okay. It wasn't my favorite jelly formula so far, where I found it to be very like even coverage, though I will say I think a lot of that just happened to be my own fault with the application, where similar to the fluorescent yellow of the collection, the first coat was just a little too thin and therefore a bit patchy, but doing a thicker second coat or even a third coat just helps even it out a lot more. Here for my full hand swatch, I only did 2 coats, and I didn't struggle as much as I did with my thumb, which obviously is going to be the largest nail on my hand, so that could also be a factor. So while it does look very even on 2 coats here, I do think some of the nails, mainly my middle finger and pinky, are definitely more sheer, where you can see a little bit more visible nail line, so this might be just a 2 to 3 coater. And here is the collage of the Walk That Walk collection with the bonus shade and the jelly of the month both on the right. I absolutely love how bright and cheery these colors are, especially because we've just been going through like the June gloom kind of weather. So these shades were the perfect pick-me-up. Now for comparisons, I wanted to quickly show Peep Toe next to a couple of other cracked reds that I think were similar in their shade of red. I think the most similar is Cherry Sugar Water because Eat, Drink, and Be Cherry is just a little bit darker. When it comes to red creams, Peep Toe is definitely not a true red like ILNP's Cherry, for example. It's a little bit hotter, but not quite as orange leaning as Holo Taco's Hot Take. Though Hot Take is definitely the closest to Peep Toe in terms of color, but again, I still would describe that one as a red orange, while Peep Toe is red with a slight orange undertone, if that makes sense. It's a subtle difference, but it's there. And unfortunately, I already destashed my bottle of Calabrian Pepper, which is another one of Crack's red creams. That one I would say is more of a true red though, or at least a slightly more blue-based red. Maybe a little darker too. Next for Footworthy, the closest cracked oranges I have are Cut on Coral and Pushin Pop. Sadly, both of those have been retired, but they're both a lot lighter, more like orangey tangerine shades. But I knew immediately that I had to see this next to Mooncat's Poems for a Harvest Moon, which is an orange base with a purple shimmer. So on paper, they definitely sound the same, but color-wise, they are a little bit different, where I would say that Mooncat is maybe more of a true pumpkin orange, while again, Footworthy has a little bit of that corally kind of undertone. I think the shimmer color is the same in both, but they have a slightly different visual look, if that makes sense. I did also want to show Footworthy next to Mooncat's Koi Whiskers, which is one of their new thermals. That one is more of a true coral, like towing the line between pink and orange. So you can see how much more orange leaning Footworthy is. And when it came to a potential dupe, at least to the base color, I also immediately thought of Dimension Nails' Longnose Hawkfish, which is a coral cream. That one is more of a true neon though. Footworthy is not neon, but definitely still very vibrant. Then for Instant Mood Booster, I wanted to quickly show this next to Banana Powder, which is the pastel yellow cream, just so you have reference of the true primary color of this new one. When it comes to closer yellow creams in my collection, the ones I immediately thought of were Orosa Star and Color Department's Mango A Go-Go. I thought Star was going to be like an exact dupe, but it's actually a few shades darker and maybe a little bit warmer, so I would almost call it more of like a school bus yellow as opposed to a true primary yellow. I do think the Color Department is closer, but that one's like a little bit lighter and more crelly leaning. Then for Barefoot Beauty, I knew I had to see this next to Prism's Food Court Flirt from their recent neon collection, as well as KBShimmer's Let It Slide, which is sadly not around anymore. While they all have shimmer in them, I think the shimmer color in Prism is a little bit closer to cracked, but the base is more of like a true highlighter yellow color, while the KBShimmer is a lot more sheer. And even though I knew these weren't going to be dupes, I figured I could also show the shade next to Mooncat's Murraya's Melody from their recent collection, which is more of a true like pale yellow base with a green shimmer. So it's not that highlighter or like tennis ball color, but the green shimmer does make it look a little bit closer to cracked, though it is a lot more sheer. And finally, for Ready to Stumble, here it is next to Mooncat's Ribbit from their recent Remedy collection, and Dreamland's Shake Your Shamrock, which is a polish pickup exclusive shade. These are obviously all super vibrant green bases with glowy blue shimmers, but I would say that Dreamland and Cracked are the most true like neon greens. Cracked is just a little bit lighter or more like yellow leaning than Dreamland, so it makes it a little closer in color to Mooncat, but it's still way more vibrant. So if you had missed out on the Dreamland, you don't want to spend the money on Mooncat, Cracked is a great alternative. And lastly, I did want to do a quick bottle comparison with Apocalypse's Making Apocalypse Jokes Like There's No Tomorrow, because that is another like neon green, but that's even more yellow leaning and with a yellow shimmer. Next up for Fresh Pedicure, I knew I had to show this next to Grotto, which is the blue from the Italy collection, but I knew that one was going to be a little bit too dark, so I thought the closer blue that I had was Nailtopia's Nailor's Knot. It definitely is closer in terms of value or like saturation levels, but I want to say it's maybe more cobalt leaning, just the shade of blue is a little off, so it's not an exact dupe. I was also reminded of a couple of Olive Ave blues like LA Looks from a few summers ago, ago and Xiala from last summer. LA Looks has more of like that pool water kind of color, while Xiala is more of a vibrant sky blue. So I think it is a little closer to Fresh Pedicure, but it's just a few shades too light. And lastly, for reference, here it is next to Mooncat's Sinking Feeling, which is a pastel sky blue. Fresh Pedicure is definitely more of a mid-tone shade. Then for Sandals Required, I did want to quickly show it next to Back to the Fuchsia, which is the hot pink jelly from last month, but that one isn't neon. It's also a few shades darker and warmer. So I would say the closest color is Crack's Cheeky Bottoms, which is another hot pink cream, but that one is a few shades lighter. It's also just a cream. There's no shimmer in it. So I did want to do a layer of Holo Taco's Halogen Glow to see if I could kind of like recreate it, but I think it would have been closer with Freezer Burn. And for some other neon hot pink comparisons, I have ILNP's two-piece on the left, which is just a cream, but I do think it is really similar to Sandals Required. Maybe it's like a little bit warmer, but it's definitely the same value. And I also wanted to show it next to Apocalypse's Hot Cordyceps Summer from their The Last of Them collection. It's super hard to tell, but I actually think the pink base of Apocalypse is closer to Sandals Required, but it has a stronger yellowy golden shimmer that kind of overpowers it. And lastly, for I Love You So Matcha, I knew I wanted to see this next to Cirque Colors Matcha, which sadly isn't around anymore, but was one of my favorite green creams from them. So it obviously is going to have a slightly different formula, not being a jelly, but color-wise, it's also a bit lighter and more white-based. And when it comes to the green jellies, I had to show this next to Cirque's Starfruit Jelly and Lime Jelly. Starfruit is more of like a true chartreuse, while Lime is a little bit darker, slightly more blue toned. So I think the Cracked is definitely closer to Starfruit, just being like, you know, a few shades darker. So I thought I could try to recreate it by layering Starfruit over Lime, and I feel like it was pretty close. I think the Cirque combination is a little bit more vibrant. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons of Cracked Polish's Walk That Walk collection, their new bonus shade, and their jelly of the month. So as always, I would love to know your thoughts on all of these releases, because if it isn't obvious enough, I am such a big fan. I just love a classic rainbow lineup. I know we see a lot of them, especially this time of year, but I'm just always gonna be a sucker for them. Like, they're always gonna be so pretty. Like, you just can't beat a rainbow color palette. But with these, I was especially impressed with their formulas as well. So it was just such a pleasure to paint with them. Again, the only one that I kind of wish was like a little bit better maybe was Barefoot Beauty, which I guess shouldn't be super surprising that it would look better in 3 coats, because it is like a pale yellow crelly. But even aside from the coverage aspect, I do think that one is also the weakest when it comes to like the shimmers, where it just doesn't stand out as much as the other 2. Like, they all are subtle shimmers, but I think the green shimmer in like the yellow base just gets like a little bit lost. So I do wish the shimmer in that one was turned up a little bit more, so it's just a bit more noticeable. But that aside, I definitely love the other shades so much, and it's so hard to choose favorites because I was just so in love with all of them as I was swatching them. It's probably easier to name my least favorites, which are probably Barefoot Beauty and Fresh Pedicure, which again, it's not like they're bad polishes by any means, but I just like the other 4 so much more. And of course, the same goes for the bonus shade. I just love like bright yellow nails in the summertime, and I think that one is so stunning. Super impressed with how pigmented that shade is. I know some people might not like that because they might feel it's like too thick. So it definitely can be like a preference thing, but I just personally like more creamy creams because they just are really perfect for nail art. And lastly, with the jelly, like, as a matcha lover, I am already just going to be biased towards loving it, even though I was like a little hesitant at first with the formula. Again, like doing the full hand swatch, I realized it was more of like a user error of just not having as much polish on the brush, because having a little bit more just makes it self-level easier, in my opinion. I know I've mentioned it so many times before that the cracked jellies can just kind of be hit or miss for me, but I think it's just easier to have like a little bit more on the brush to just get a better application. So yeah, overall, I do really love these. If anything, my least favorite thing is like the more foot focused theme with the collection, just because as like a content creator, I have had my fair share of random men sending me like a message to ask if I'm gonna wear a polish like on my toes. And don't get me wrong, I love a cute pedicure and I'm not trying to kink shame, but it's like there's just a fine line and I don't want to do that stuff, you know, especially not for free. So, you know, that is just kind of like not like a worry, but just, you know, when I'm wearing a polish and I'm going to be talking about like, oh, I'm wearing footworthy, I just know it's gonna like potentially open the door to some unwanted messages or comments. So that's the only part that I'm like not looking forward to, but I do still really love the collection. So if you're interested in picking any of these up, they are gonna be launching on Friday, June 20th at 10 a.m. Eastern time. As a reminder, I am an affiliate with Cracked Polish, so I will have my affiliate link and code in the description box. Using my code gives you 10% off your order. As always, a big thank you to all of you who do use my code. A lot of you ended up using it last month during the sale, so a huge thank you for that. But even if you don't plan on picking anything up, I still would love to know your thoughts down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!